So one of the most useful tools you can have in this hobby is a pair of calipers. And these are not really nice ones, they're not real expensive, but they do a pretty good job. And you'll see that this rides up and down a measurement track. They're really simple to use. You have on mode gives you millimeters, inches, and when you measure something, you zero it out, bring it in or bring it out, whichever direction you're going. And these happen to be digital, which I like, and they give you an exact measurement. I'll show you an example. So we use this Celestron T adapter for Schmidt-Cassegrains, and it should be pretty well known that this is considered 50 millimeters across. These kind of numbers are really important when you're using like a focal reducer, and that focal reducer has a very specific back focusing number that you have to achieve. But as an example, I'm going to go to the end here and to right here. I'm going to zero this out, and then I'm going to close it. And as you can see, that's 49.95. That's pretty close to 50. I was maybe just a touch off, but being off 100th of a millimeter is not going to hurt you. But yeah, say that's 50 millimeters. Also have this little ring right here. With this one, I can, you don't want to get the ends of the threads because that part's going to actually be threaded in. You're going to go to the outside part. I'll show you that clearly here. And a lot of you, I understand, don't know how this works, but round down, we'll call that 5 millimeters. So you would think, in fact, this plus this should be 55 millimeters, but it's really important that when you're trying to reach a specific number that you put all your components together and then check them again. And I'll show you what happens here. So I'm at 55.5. Now, half of a millimeter can be kind of an issue. You can see what's happening is that there's a little gap right here. So not all fittings will close all the way. Like for example, this particular adapter here, as you can see, the threads don't ride all the way up to the barrel here. So there's a little bit of a gap. If you have that going on with like multiple pieces, half a millimeter, you're gonna end up like 3 off or something. So that's a little tip. Get all your components together and then take your measurement. If you're interested in the inner diameter of something, you can use the other side of this like that. And then make sure you zero it out. And then when you bring it in, that'll give you your number. So that's 38. Really handy to have these guys. This is a very useful tool. There will come a time when you're going to need it for something. So highly recommend getting a pair of calipers. Something you're probably not familiar with is a thread pitch gauge. Some of you might be, but these are really handy. If you get one, make sure you get one that's got the standard or American threads and then also metric. But what you'll do with this, usually you can do it in combination with one of these scales. These kind of guys like here, these flexible, I guess they're a type of plastic. They can be purchased at most of your hardware stores and that sort of thing for like $1. So really useful to have, and you can put your bolts in here and find out what they are exactly. There's a lot of times where you're going to need to know exactly what's what. One of the most common, and I'm going to show you this because people run into this all the time. M6, which is a metric 6 bolt, is very common in astronomy. The 1/4 20, which is the American, very often seen in photography. And the two, are obviously mixing quite a bit. You're getting parts that are designed specifically for cameras, most always using the 1/4-20. M6 is a lot on your tube rings and that sort of thing. But what you don't want to do is confuse the two, which a lot of people will do. And let me show you. I happen to know for certain that this is an M6 and this is a 1/4-20. Now, if you try to drive one of these in, you're going to say, oh, it's a little tight, and you start forcing it in. Now you've ruined your threads. And that can be really bad on an expensive set of rings or that sort of thing. But yeah, not much difference between these two. And not visually, not to most people. They just assume they're the same thing. They are not the same. A very important note, if you're trying to find a bolt, a particular size bolt, that sort of thing. The thing with bolts is that metric and standard are handled a little different. Now, if you need the length of the bolt, it's not the overall length. It's from the head to the end of the threads. So this is the length of the bolt. You need to know the thread pitch, which is extremely important. And that's where this comes in. Now, say you've got a bolt, you need something a little longer, like you're trying to go through some risers or something. And what you'll notice is, like right here where I've got M6 and 1/4-20, you're like, well, which one is it? Having a thread pitch gauge is really good, and this is what it does. So like I said, I know this is a metric, and I know this is a standard. So let me zoom this in so you can see it a lot better. See, that's 20. With American bolts, what's being measured is how many threads there are per inch. You can clearly see that that is a 1/4-20. Now, if I put the metric up here, you can clearly see this is a 1. See how that is? Not immediately noticeable to most people, but obvious here. So what would you call this? Fits here. We know there are, another way you could do this is you could measure an inch of threads and count how many threads are in it. This is half an inch. See that? Don't measure from the end. It's half-inch bolt. So it's 1/4-20 by ½ inch. And if you were gonna need it a little bit longer, you might get a 1/4-20 by 1 inch or a 2 inch or whatever length it is that you need. With the metric, they're measuring between the threads. You need to know what the distance is between two threads rather than how many threads there are per inch. So that's why having one of these thread pitch gauges is so good. You've got coarse and fine, you've got metric and standard on there, and these are pretty cheap. But if you ever try to drive the wrong bolt into the wrong hole, you're gonna threaded hole, you're gonna end up damaging something, and I'm trying to help you avoid that. Like I said, little tip, Two most common you're gonna see are M6 and the 1/4 inch in the standard American. You want to make sure you know the difference between these two because they will both appear quite frequently. Another useful tool, strap wrench. Make sure you get one with rubber. Now they make these where they're chain and that sort of thing, and you obviously don't want to do that. And you never want to put a pipe wrench or anything on astronomical fittings of any kind. Most everything's aluminum or anodized aluminum that has a finish on it, and you're going to destroy it. So I can't get this apart, it's stuck. So what do? With this tool, you can pull down, get close to the diameter of whatever barrel it is you're trying to separate. You wrap it on there like this, pull it tight, and depending on which way you're going is how you would lay this, but you just basically just hold one side firmly and twist with the other. And there you go. Problem averted. And I don't have a bunch of teeth marks in my equipment. I haven't destroyed the finish or any of that. So definitely get you one of these. What happens, just the law of thermodynamics pretty much. You go out where it's cold, you go out where it's hot. Things expand and shrink under temperature change. And a lot of times manufacturers, like across manufacturers, they have slightly different threads, and you end up getting a binding where you can't get something off, and that's terrible. I would even recommend taking this out in the field with you, like have one available all the time. Never know when you'll need it, but yeah, don't do the pipe wrench approach. That brings me to another thing that's really useful to have. Now, regarding the strap wrench and how to avoid that from the beginning, there's a lot of different opinions on this. Some people think that beeswax is good, paraffin wax. I've heard all kinds of different opinions on this, so I'll give you my opinion. I like this product right here. It's a long-lasting, 100% dry to the touch dry lube. And why I like this as opposed to wax is if you were to put wax on here, all the wax products I've used, and then you tighten your stuff down, it'll force it out through the threads in most cases. And when you have something hanging over the top of an expensive camera sensor, there's the potential for that wax to fall onto the sensor and that sort of thing. I like this product in particular because it dries to the touch. It doesn't leave a residue, but there's just enough of a lubrication there on the threads that they don't bind as bad as they would normally without it. It's really good for this, in my opinion. Like I said, no extra residue. And you can take this stuff, put a little bit on a piece of paper or something, and take a paintbrush or a toothbrush and just lightly go over your threads where you've had previous problems with binding and that sort of thing. And this is a lifesaver. This is really good product, in my opinion. So almost certain that most of you have never seen a spanner wrench like this. As you can see, it's adjustable, and then it has little locks on it. And then you have different tips that you insert into here, into the ends. And then it would be used to turn a locking ring counterclockwise or clockwise to tighten it. And I'll show you one. This is a pretty common Canon lens. It is a 50mm 1.4. See if I can point these out to you. But like right here, you see that little hole? and then there's one on the opposite side. That is a retaining ring that helps hold the lens elements together, and you would get it positioned exactly right, and then you can remove that ring. You'll find them in a lady asked me recently about an ETX, how to remove the retaining ring in there, and that's what that is. This uses a spanner. You would use a spanner wrench to do that. So whenever you see a circular ring that's got something locked down, like for example the center column of a Schmidt Cassegrain, you'll see it there a lot, but those two holes that are opposite each other, this is the tool for that, spanner wrench. Not quite as common, but maybe for sure something I'd say at least half the people will run into if they're trying to do any maintenance on telescopes or camera lenses or that sort of thing. You're going to need one. Something I find handy is one of these Travel Smart Conair luggage weights, or scale, I'm sorry. And you'll find these at Walmart Supercenters and that sort of thing in the luggage area. And what it's designed to do is give you a quick idea of how much your luggage weighs, so you don't exceed what the weight allowance is before you get charged. But the purpose I use it for, because these are pretty cheap, they're under $20, is sometimes you can pick up a scope from just the hook. You could add a strap here and do the same thing, but you can find the overall weight of your optical system as you've put it together. And if you're playing around with different ideas and camera combinations and hardware and that sort of thing, you can get a quick idea of how much it's going to weigh. Sometimes that's sort of awkward on a conventional scale of sorts, so these are really good to have, and I'll show you this one, how it works. So here you just turn the power on. I know about where the center of gravity is on this telescope, and you switch to pounds or kilograms, and you just pick it up, wait for the beep. It's swaying around a little bit, so it's throwing it off, but basically 13.5 pounds for this total setup here. So another useful thing to have is one of these fabric tapes, flexible measuring tapes. Make sure you've got metric and standard. Typically, you'll see most measurements in astronomy related equipment in millimeters, but let's say you need a Batinov mask or a dew heater strap. Many of these are flexible, so they can accommodate different sizes, but let's say they don't. You just need the dimensions, so having one of these takes out the guesswork of what the diameter of something is, or the circumference rather, I'm sorry. The diameter would be this way, but if you just call this an 80 millimeter scope, you'd be wrong, because this has a retractable dew shield and it's slightly larger than the barrel. And just because the optics are 80 millimeter doesn't mean that the housing is. So in cases where you need to be real specific, it's really good to have one of these tapes. Now, something indispensable is a technician's set. And that's typically how you see these categorized, because it's a lot of really small bits of different kinds. You'll have Allen heads and really small Phillips and that sort of thing. Typically they'll come with like a magnetic holder so that you're not losing stuff as you're pulling it out. But having one of these sets around is crucial in this hobby. If you're moving between equipment types, changing out telescope parts a lot, you're gonna need something like this around. I wouldn't cheap out on it. I would get a good set. A good set's gonna cost you somewhere around $50 US. We can sleep under the stars, we can sleep under the stars.